What's up, guys? War here. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're coming back with another leveling guide for Diablo 4. This is going to be a sorcerer ice shards barrier build. I am really excited about this build. Me and my community, big shout out to my community. This is the Warriors. We helped put this together, and I think it's very strong and probably one of the better, more durable sorcerer builds, especially for leveling up in Diablo 4. So real quick before we get into everything, there is going to be links down to the spreadsheet down in the description down below that has everything that you guys need to know for the build, as well as what skills to take and any modifications to the skills as you level up. Now remember, I do have to mention this is just a blueprint. These are just leveling guides. These aren't things that are set in stone, so some things may change, and but I do think that these builds are going to be really good. So with that said, let's get right into it. So when it comes to sorcerer, it's all about doing high amounts of damage. But in this case, we are doing a barrier build for sorcerer, which is going to rely heavily on having a barrier pretty much at all times and freezing our enemies and doing a lot of piercing damage in the sense with ice shards. Okay, a lot of these enemies are going to be constantly frozen, and we're just going to get a lot of vulnerable damage, and we're just going to be able to pierce enemies with ice shards and just absolutely dominate. It's actually a really good build. This is inspired from the old Ice Blades build a month ago, which used a similar build, but instead of like ice shards, in a sense, it was with ice blades to reset cooldowns. However, ice blades is just not what we're doing in this build, so we're going to go with ice shards instead. So starting off, we are taking Frostbolt. Frostbolt is just going to throw a bolt, which is going to help chill enemies. And remember, we are trying to freeze as many enemies as possible. So when we apply chilling, which is a crowd control effect, for 15%, as we continue to hit chilled enemies with more chill effects, they have a chance to become frozen, which is huge for us. So we got Frostbolt. We're taking Enhanced. It has a chance to explode on chilled enemies, hitting surrounding enemies. And then the chance is 100% against frozen enemies. So when the enemy is frozen, we're going to have Frostbolt hit everything that's around those enemies, which is really cool. Then we're taking Flickering Frostbolt, because Frostbolt makes frozen enemies vulnerable for 3 seconds. In this build, almost every single enemy that we are going to be fighting is going to be frozen in the first couple shots. You'll see in just a second. So we got Frostbolt down to Flickering Frostbolt. Then we're going to come down, we're going to take Ice Shards. We're going to launch 5 shards at an enemy, dealing a lot of damage, and then it's going to deal 25% increased damage against frozen enemies. So that's actually going to be a 60% damage on each if they are frozen. We're taking Enhanced Ice Shards that have a 40% chance to ricochet to another enemy, and then Ice Shards always ricochets if they're frozen. Remember, we're freezing everything. This is literally the Sub-Zero build for Sorcerer. Then we're taking Greater Ice Shards. While we have a barrier active, the casts of Ice Shards treat enemies as if they were frozen. So when we have a barrier active, Ice Shards is going to deal 60% damage with each of the 5 shards instead of 35%. And Ice Shards are going to always ricochet to other enemies because we're treating them as if they're frozen. So this is huge. Next, we're taking Devastation for a little bit of mana fixing, which is really cool. And then we're doing a Potent Warding for a little bit of added defense. Now, Potent Warding is after casting a non-basic skill, we gain 2% resistance to all. So basically 2% all resist, and then 1 resistant to that skill's element for 3 seconds, 1%. This is really good. If you guys did not like that, you could definitely come in here and take this for a little bit more added damage. I really like Potent Warding, but it's definitely something that you don't have to take. Next, we're going to come down here. We're grabbing Ice Armor. This is our main barrier skill. Ice Armor automatically gives us a barrier, and it's going to last for 6 seconds. We're going to gain... we're going to absorb 30% of our base life and damage, and then while it's active, 5% of our damage dealt is added to barrier. Then we have Enhanced Ice Armor. While it's active, we get a big mana regen. This is very standard on sorcerers. Then we have Shimmering Ice Armor. Enemies we hit while ice armor is active, has a 15% chance to become frozen for 3 seconds. Now you do have this one, mystical ice armor, which makes, damaging against vulnerable enemies, contributes 50% more to the armor, or the ice armor's barrier. That's fine. I'm not too worried about that. With us freezing things, we're not going to be taking too many hits, so the barrier life is fine. But shimmering ice armor allows us to hit or have a 15% chance for them to become frozen. So remember, we're hitting things with frostbolt, which is going to chill them. We're hitting them with ice shards, which is going to continue to chill them and then make them, and we treat them as if they're frozen. So we're hitting multiple enemies, and then shimmering armor is going to stack that to make them have an even greater chance to become frozen. This is insane, right? Next, we're taking Frost Nova. Frost Nova auto freezes. So we're freezing them for 3 seconds. We have Enhanced Frost Nova, which when we kill a frozen enemy, it reduces the cooldown, which is huge. And then Mystical Frost Nova makes them vulnerable. So we're going to be able to make them frozen. We're going to be able to make them vulnerable. It's going to be insane. And against bosses, this is arguably one of the best skills that the sorcerer has, especially against bosses, to make them vulnerable for 6 seconds. That's a long time. Then we have Teleport to get around. This is just giving us our mobility skill here with Enhanced Teleport, and then Shimmering Teleport for damage reduction as we're bouncing around. Then we have Glass Cannon. We're dealing an 18% increased damage, but we take 9% more damage. However, this is mitigated to a degree because we're going to be freezing everything. Then we have Elemental Attunement. On a lucky hit, our crit strikes have a chance to reset the cooldowns of a defensive skill. Can happen once every 10 seconds. So on a lucky hit with crit strikes, we can reset Frost Nova, Ice Armor, or potentially Teleport. In most cases, it's going to be Ice Armor or Frost Nova, which is really, really good for us. So now we come down, we're going to skip any of the conjurations here. We're doing 3 points in Precision Magic, which gives our lucky hit chance is increased by 15%. We're taking 1 point in Align the Elements. The elements. You gain 1% damage reduction against elites each second you haven't take damage from one, up to 40%. So as we continue to not take damage, this can go up by 1% each second until we hit 40. Once we get hit, this resets. So we get hit by a boss and we're at 40%. It starts back over at 1% and continues to go up for each second. This is really, really good just for normal damage reduction against those boss fights. Then we're taking Mana Shield. Every time we spend 100 mana, we gain 5% damage reduction for 5 seconds. This is going to be really easy to cast with Ice Shards costing 30. You're talking about casting 3 Ice Shards and then we get damage reduction for 5 seconds. And then this can continue to stack, which is kind of cool. Then we have Protection. Using a cooldown grants us a 10% of our max life as what? A barrier for 2 seconds. So our cooldowns are Teleport, Ice Armor, Frost Nova, and then Deep Freeze. So with Protection and Ice Armor, we should always have a barrier up. Always. So this is really, really good. And it gives us a little bit more max life. It gives us just more defense, right? It makes us a little bit more durable. Then we're going to come down and we're going to max all 3 of these because we're all about freezing things. So let's take a look. We got Icy Veil. Our barriers have a 15% increased duration. This is huge because remember, we want everything to do barrier stuff. So as long as our barriers are lasting longer, we continuing to get our strong effects for freeze and vulnerability damage. Then we have Snap Freeze. On a lucky hit, we have a 9% chance to instantly freeze them. Even better. Then we have Cold Front. When you have a barrier active, you apply 24% more chill. So when we have a barrier, our chill effects are going to be insane. We're going to have a very high percentage to chill enemies and then freeze them. And then we're going to be able to do a crap ton of damage. This is vital for this build. Now we're going to come down. Now usually in the leveling guides, we don't take a whole lot of ultimates. But for this build, Blizzard just doesn't work. You could take Ice Blades if you really wanted to. But in the end, I think we're going to be annihilating everything like Sub-Zero does in Mortal Kombat. I don't think Ice Blades is necessary unless you really wanted to constantly reset these two. But I actually like Deep Freeze just for some added flavor. So we have Deep Freeze. Encase yourself in ice. You become immune for 4 seconds, continually dealing 25% damage and chilling enemies for 14%. So we're going to chill enemies, which is most likely going to freeze them. And then when Deep Freeze expires, it deals 100% damage. Casting Deep Freeze again ends the effect early. Then we have Enhanced. When Deep Freeze ends, we gain 10% of our life as what? Oh, a barrier. So now our ultimate is going to give us a barrier as well to help stack all of our effects. And the barrier of our 10% of your base life as a barrier for 6 seconds for each enemy you froze while it was active. Night. Have a great night, dude. I appreciate it, man. I'll catch you later. Thanks for being part of the channel. Then we're going to have Supreme Deep Freeze. When Deep Freeze ends, your non-ultimate cooldowns are reduced by 50%. This really helps Ice Armor and Frost Nova. These are the only other 2 cooldowns that our ultimate is really going to affect, which is going to do what? Help us keep our barrier active at all times. Now, our last 4 nodes here we maxed out. Now, I might be doing a little overkill, but we are quadrupling down on frozen stuff. So first we're taking Permafrost. Frost skills deal 15% increased damage to elites. This is huge. We're going to delete elites, okay? Then we have Horror Frost. You deal 9% increased damage to chilled enemies and 18% increased damage to frozen. Well, we're going to be chilling everything all the time, and most of the time they're all going to be frozen, so we're going to be dealing a lot of extra damage. 18% more damage. It's going to be nuts. We have Icy Touch. We deal 12% increased cold damage to vulnerable enemies. Remember, we make enemies vulnerable with Mystical Frost. And then we also make enemies vulnerable with Flickering Frostbolt. So we get a lot of extra damage against vulnerable enemies. Then to top it all off, we're doing Frigid Breeze. On a lucky hit, cold damage against vulnerable enemies has a 20% chance to generate 15 mana. This is really good for mana sustain because for sorcerers, mana sustain is really tough. So for our big boy ability here, we are taking Shatter. After freeze expires, enemies explode for 25% of the damage you dealt to them while frozen. And seeing how almost all of our enemies we're fighting is going to be frozen, this really just helps us annihilate big, large groups of mobs. Now, when we were looking at this build, there's not too many of these other skills here that really work for our build, but Shatter seems to work really, really well. Now, when we come back to the sustain part, the only thing that we really have for mana sustain is enhanced armor for regen. Now, this is where things can get a little tricky, and we can kind of change things up to really give us some sustain. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we could add things to give us a little bit more sustain and dip into the burning. However, this is going to have to take up a skill slot, and we really just don't have that. So there's not too many things that really help us with that. Hopefully, with the amount of enemies we are going to be deleting, we'll be able to get mana back. But the main way that we are going to get our mana sustain back is through our gear. So let's go take a look at our gear and our skills. First, we have our enhancements, though. The first one that you're going to want to take at level 15 is Frostbolt. The reason we're taking Frostbolt is because direct damage from skills applies chill. So all of our skills are going to apply chill. And the more chill that we apply, the easier they become frozen. So Frostbolt chills, Ice Shards chill, Ice Armor chills. If it did damage, it doesn't. Frost Nova, even though it freezes enemies, it also applies chill. And then when we pop our Deep Freeze ultimate, the chilling effect here for 14% is still going to apply even more chill. So they should be frozen with Deep Freeze no matter what. And then even with Teleport, if we did damage here, we would chill them as well. So Frostbolt is the main enchantment that we have for this build. Now, the second one that you're going to take later on is going to be Ice Shards. Ice Shards automatically conjure and fly towards frozen enemies. All of the enemies are going to be frozen, so we're going to have additional Ice Shards just flying to deal even more damage. Now let's take a look at our gear here. Remember, guys, this gear is codex based only. So we're only taking codexes, and these are legendary powers that you can get from doing dungeons. And this is The main ones that you're going to need. I didn't put in any of these leveling guides for legendaries that you have to find on a random drop, because these legendary codexes are things that are going to help the build, and you can get them no matter what. So starting off, we have Aspect of the Protector. Damaging an elite grants us a barrier. The absorb damage is fine, but this effect can happen once every 30 seconds. So we're going to have a barrier when we fight elites and just have non-stop barriers. Next, we're taking Storm Swell. You deal up to 20% increased damage to vulnerable enemies while we have a barrier. So this is even more damage. Aspect of the Piercing Cold. This is one of the main legendary affixes that you need for the build. Ice Shards pierce 3 to 4 times, dealing less damage per subsequent enemy hit. But the fact that it's going to pierce, and remember what happens when we have a barrier. Ice Shards treat enemies as if they're frozen, and when they're frozen, Ice Shards ricochets. So we're going to ricochet and pierce our enemies. So Ice Shards, shooting 5 shards at a time, is going to hit a lot of enemies. So this is the main one that you need. Next, we have Aspect of Biting Cold. When we freeze an enemy, which is going to happen all the time, there's up to a 35% chance that they become vulnerable. So now we're still stacking our vulnerable, which is going to do even more damage. Then we have Prodigy Aspect, and here's where we have our mana sustain. Using a cooldown restores mana. So remember, we have Ice Armor, Frost Nova, and Deep Freeze, and Teleport to help regen mana. Then we have Aspect of the Umbral. So this one is the best mana regen skill that you can get, or legendary affix so far from a dungeon, for your mana or your primary resource regen. You restore up to 4 mana when you crowd control an enemy. Well, guess what Chill is? Chill is crowd controlling an enemy. So every single enemy that we crowd control, we're going to get resource back. 4 every single time is insane when one cast of Ice Shards is hitting and then ricocheting and piercing. So imagine how many enemies we're hitting when we chill them and how much mana we're going to get back. This is absolutely insane for this build. Then when it comes to the gems, guys, I know the gem size isn't what you're going to be getting at level 50 or whatever, but once you get to a point where you're able to start using gems and really put them into your weapons, you're going to want Sapphire for crit strike damage against controlled or crowd controlled enemies, which is going to be all the time. And then rubies for more max life, and then skull for armor, because these characters, I don't really need the extra all resist. We just need a little bit more armor to tank some more shots. So guys, that is the Sorcerer Ice Shards barrier build. I think it is really, really strong, and I think it is something that could be very, very powerful if you're not interested in using Chain Lightning. Again, you know, you can change this however you want. I just think this is the best way to play the build. So like the video, guys, if you guys have enjoyed it. Comment down below, what do you guys think of the Ice Shards barrier, and let me know if you guys are playing Sorcerer this Diablo 4 start at launch, and make sure to subscribe if you guys are new, and as always, stay gaming. We'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.